Today's guest is a big one for me. Check it off the bucket list. It's a big one. Chris Rose joins the show. He had the best damn sports show, period. We talked about that great show from my childhood. That was one of my favorites when I was a little kid. Talked about only sports, and that was it. It was awesome. Amazing guests. And of course, one of the bigger stories is the April Fool's joke between Tom Arnold and Michael Strahan. Stick around for that one. Awesome story. And of course, he had Intentional Talk, which was a show with Kevin Millar on the MLB Network. And currently, he has a podcast on the Jomboy Media Network called the Chris Rose Rotation. And he works for the NFL Network. We talked about the NFL draft that's coming up from April 29th through May 1st, which he'll be hosting live from Cleveland, Ohio on the NFL Network. So why don't you sit back, relax, and let's talk some football and, of course, more about Chris Rose right now. Today's guest, you've seen him on the best damn sports show, period. MLB Network, Jomboy Media, and of course, NFL Network. You can catch him live April 29th through May 1st, only on NFL Network, covering all live coverage of the 2021 NFL Draft. It's Chris Rose. Thanks for coming on, Chris.
Absolutely, Taylor. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm pumped. I want to talk some football, but I absolutely want to talk about your career. The best damn sports show, period. Absolutely one of my favorite sports shows of all time. I remember watching with my dad when I was very young. I was like really one of the first like man guy shows, that was really put on the map, and you guys, with you, Tom Arnold, Rob Dibble, and all, you had a bunch of cast of characters coming through. How did you guys manage to, for you personally, how did you have to manage all those egos and all that personality every single day?
Well, it wasn't the ego that was the problem. And it really wasn't a problem. It was trying to balance personality with entertainment with no roadmap. Our boss, George Greenberg, told us at the beginning when the show launched, he said, listen, there is no blueprint to what we're doing here. Try anything. If you screw up, I'll let you know, and we might actually let you try it again. So I've always said that it was about 15 years ahead of its time. If it had come in 2010 or 2015, 2017, sometime around then, I think it would have even been bigger. The main problem with the show itself was that it was called default programming, which meant that if you didn't have a game on in your region, let's say you lived out in Los Angeles where the Dodgers were on Fox Sports West or the Lakers were on Fox Sports West, if there was a game that night, we were on at 11 o'clock. If there wasn't a game on that night, we were on at 9 o'clock. So the show was always a moving target. So in that sense, it made it frustrating because there was never, if somebody said, hey, what time's your show on? I'd be like, well, what day is it? So,
right.
That always made it a problem, but it was just so much fun to do. And the fact that our bosses just said, go with it. Go roll with it instead of stay in your lane, stay in this little box. Don't try that. They were like, and it's pretty much what digital has become today.
Right. And the fact that you can see it a lot, even in podcasts or maybe some movies, you'll say like the director or the producer, or whatever, is like, let them do their thing. Do not tell them how to talk. Don't tell them how to do their own personality. And that kind of what you were saying, kind of just be themselves. And you guys crushed it from 2001 to 2009. Now, there was some, road bumps, which a lot of shows do. When I was just researching because I was too young to really even notice. But when you guys changed from the old format to the new format, where it was 2005, I think it was, early 2005, the new format where Tom Arnold was going to be more of like a late night show kind of format, and it really didn't work out well. What do you think it was? Why did they ultimately go back to the old format and also have you on as the main host?
So
yet
during
again.
that time where they tried the Tom show,
Right.
I thought it was a great disservice, first and foremost, to Tom and to the premise of the show. I mean, that's when they removed me for a couple of months. They were trying for some sort of, I don't know exactly who it was, a ratings jump or trying to see if, because Tom kind of left us not shortly after that, if I remember correctly. And I imagine that was only a cost maneuver. It had nothing to do with Tom in particular. I loved working with Tom. I still keep in contact with him today. And he was a ton of fun to work with because he was so unpredictable. Like, that's what you want. You don't want to know what's coming out of a guy's mouth, at all.
Right.
So I think it got away from what the show was about. The show was about a bunch of dudes hanging out from different sports who were talking about sports that weren't in their area of expertise. And really, that was the main thing. The whole idea of the show was to get athletes to let their guard down. We didn't need to talk to them about every 3-2 pitch, every 3rd and 8 conversion, the last 2 minutes of the NBA game. We wanted to get to know them for who they are, for the dads they are, the husbands they are, what makes them tick away from the field, what do they love to do when they're partying, like all that sort of stuff. Things that we have become so privy to today in the world of social media, because they're knocking down the doors and breaking down the walls between fan and athlete. And I really feel like we were one of the first shows to ever do that.
Yeah. The fact that like you guys kind of were like the table setters for a lot of networks are starting to try to do that. I mean, you have even the Mike Goliks of the world who played football, but he has now the ability to talk about everything. And
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say there wasn't, I guess ESPN in particular doesn't really let their guard down all the time, but I guess the more of the networks like a Barstool or something like that, where they got to talk about everything and just kind of you can see their personality and see who they are. And I think that's exactly what the Best Damn Sports Show period brought to viewers everywhere, and that's why it was so successful, because you got to see, you know, everyone loves to see who their favorite players are and what they talk
Mm-hmm.
about, but to talk about, personal stuff is also great too. But you guys had some unbelievable guests with Vince Vaughn and Matt Damon, Kobe. Who is one of your favorite guests to come on the show? And if there's a story to tell, I would love to hear it.
Well, I loved when The Rock came on. He was just really starting his crescendo.
Sure.
He had been wrestling, he was dabbling in the entertainment world,
Right.
and you could see that his rocket ship was just about to take off. And the thing I remember most about him was how kind he was to everyone on the
Mm.
set. So, just to let you know, before a guest would come on, we're not like a lot of the late night talk shows where they kind of stick you into a green room. And then the first time they see you, I always heard that Letterman just liked to see you for the first time on the set because he wanted that spontaneity. For us, it was a little bit different. We'd go over and we'd chop it up with the guest or whatever. We'd have 10 minutes before a segment just to make sure everything was set. So I remember seeing him, maybe it was the second or third time he was on. And I was just asking him how his family was. And all these people were coming up to him and just wanting to shake his hand. And he was just the most pleasant person to everyone. And that stuck with me because there were some guests that were assholes and weren't nice except when the camera was on.
Mm.
And I have no respect for those people. And that really, really bothered me a lot. So to see somebody who understood what it took to put a production on air every day, because it wasn't easy. It was 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, a non-highlight show, coming up with, creative ways to ask questions, fun little skits we're doing, humor. It was tough. And he understood that and he appreciated it.
It's like we always look at The Rock on Instagram, how like big, larger than life guy he is. And I always think like, I really hope he's like that off camera or off Instagram. And you just said it right there. He is this guy where it's like, he loves everybody. He's always nice. Everybody gives everyone a second to talk. But the last thing I want to talk about this, and we'll move on to MLB Network and probably one of my favorite shows as well, Intentional Talk. The April Fool's joke between
Mm-hmm.
Tom Arnold and Strahan. I remember watching that, and I was asking my dad, I'm like, "Is this real?" Because of course I was young, and I was like, "Why are they fighting on TV?" Michael Strahan, unbelievable Giants player. Tom Arnold was killing it on the show, and also in comedy. Take me through that because I was looking up and reading stuff. I don't know if everybody was in on it, and from what I read, I don't think everybody was. I would
No.
love to hear that story because that's an unbelievable
Yeah,
turn
it's
of
definitely
events.
a prank you'll want to check out.
Yeah, yeah,
So I was in on it as the host, and our crew was in on it. Michael Strahan was not in on it. Rob Dibble was not in on it, and Rodney Peete was not in on it. And Tom was coming back to the show. He was no longer on the show. He was coming back as a guest who was getting ready to write a book and kind of
yeah.
a little bit of a tell-all book. And we took fake excerpts talking about how Rob Dibble, I don't even remember what it was, that he's got major anger management issues and all sorts of stuff. For Rodney Peete, it was, he's been riding the coattails of his Hollywood wife for years.
Whoa, that's tough.
And it was funny because Dibble and Rodney, like I had to keep reading the excerpts, and they're sitting across from me, and I have to keep a straight face. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, you could see like their eyes just get larger and larger and the steam coming out of their head. But what really pissed them off was what Tom fictitiously wrote about Michael Strahan was that, I don't know if you remember this, but when Strahan was fighting for more money against the Giants and wasn't coming into training camp, Tiki Barber came out and said something
Right.
about it and got blasted in the media, which he should have been because you don't ever talk about other people's money. And sure enough, Tom wrote about it in his little fake book. Strahan and Tom start pointing fingers at each other. Right. And Rodney and Dibbs were like, yeah, you can't write that about a dude when it comes to his money. That's his livelihood, Tom. We don't care what you say about us, but you're talking about that, and that's wrong. And Strahan starts doing this, and Tom starts poking back, and then Tom pops him in his face, and they start fighting. And I was like, what the hell is going on here? And they pile over, and Strahan gets up after about 30 seconds because Rodney and Dibble got in the middle of it and start punching Tom in the ribs. And I was serious. I was like, what is going on here? I'm not getting in the middle of that. It's
no, you're guys off the side.
I'm like, I'm good over here, guys. Good luck with that. And Strahan pops up and goes April Fools. So what had happened was the night before, Tom had called Strahan and said, hey, listen, they're bringing me back. It's this fake book. I'm going to say some shitty things about Rodney and Dibble and you, and I want you to get really mad and like get pissed off at me. And sure enough, he did. I don't think Tom felt like he was going to get attacked physically by Strahan, and he certainly didn't expect Dibble and Rodney to get their shots in on the ribs.
Oh my
but
God.
It played to perfection. Go watch it and go watch my face as Strahan gets taken down because I am terrified.
Yeah, I watched it a couple times over and over again, and your face was like,
yeah, it was bad.
You were looking back and forth, like, should I do something? And I remember like the original broadcast, they went to black, and then there was the other footage I saw where Michael pops up, April Fools, whatever. But all-time moment. I want to talk about intentional talk with Kevin Millar. Kevin, from just watching over his career, has been this larger-than-life personality. And now hitting the TV screen and hitting a show with you are very professional. You have been around a long time. How was it early on, kind of teaching Kevin the ropes of television and trying to have him, be a good sidekick to you, co-host to you, and have this awesome debate about baseball 5 days a week?
Well, the reason the show worked with the two of us is because we had been friends for 8 years before we had ever worked together. And he used to come on Best Damn. It was three guys, three active players. When I talk to active players right now, and they're always like, I might be interested in your business one day. I was like, good, start today. And I use these three guys as examples. Michael Strahan, who came on Best Damn every Monday, regardless of how the Giants did. He would join us either via satellite or he'd fly in.
Wow.
Jalen Rose, who's now a media superstar, constantly did stuff with us, would fill in as a guest host. Here's a guy who signed a $90 million contract. He didn't need to do that. He'd cover the NBA Finals for us. He was great. And then Millar. Every 2 weeks or so, he'd join us from a ballpark somewhere. And Kevin and I became friends. We're basically the same age. His mom lives 10 minutes from me. We'd see each other in the off season. I had young kids at the time. He was just starting a family. And I said, listen, when some baseball team realizes you can't play anymore, give me a call. We're going to work together. Wow. And we worked together part-time in 2010 at MLB Network. At the end of the season, our bosses, Tony Petitti and John Entz, called us into the office and said, hey, we want you to do a show together. We think you guys would be great. And we said, okay, we're not moving to New Jersey, but okay. So they took a leap of faith. I mean, today, because of COVID, you see how technologically shows are done. People are inside their houses. We were a decade ahead of that. We've been doing that since 2011, full time. It ain't easy. It was not easy on our production crew to be in Secaucus, New Jersey, but have one host be in Austin, Texas, and another one be in Los Angeles, California. It is not easy, but it worked. And the only thing I told Kevin was, he's like, well, what do I do? I said, be you, dude. Don't be a TV guy. I said, if you would be a TV guy, this thing's not going to work.
Right.
At least once a month, I would always say on air, don't change. Do not change. Don't clean up your grammar. Don't, like, if your mind takes you somewhere in the middle of a discussion, go. Break every rule that was ever taught about television before this, because that's what people want, is authenticity. And exactly what you see with Millar is exactly who he is in person. And 99% of the time, it's great. 1% of the time, it would drive me nuts. But there's stuff about me that drives him nuts. And that's why we're such good friends. And that's why it worked on television. And that's why I think a lot of people are probably confused as to why we're not together anymore.
Yeah, it was personally upsetting for me. But I know Steven Nelson is doing a fantastic job right now, filling in for you and doing a great job. I actually had Nelson on my podcast, 8 months ago, before, like, he was awesome right in the middle of the pandemic. He was great. What was such a good relationship between you two, of course, before that, but the back and forth banter and the discussions and laughing, he's got his shirt off. It's all the cowboy hat on. It's just, it was a match made in heaven. And do you guys think, and maybe he'll come on your show now at Jomboy Media as a guest or something like that, but is there something maybe more down the line that you guys maybe will do a show like that again if things fall into place?
Yeah, of course. I mean, we miss working with one another. I mean, Steven's a really good pro. He's going to do a good job with that show. It's just, the one thing is that the show was built for the two of us. Right. It's not like Sports Center where you just change anchors. And I'm not saying that the show can't succeed or even be better than it was when the two of us were on it, because that would be unfair to Steven. He's going to put his own stamp on it and he's going to do a great job with it. But the point is that it was one of the few shows where the producers, or in this case, the president of the network and his number two, came to the guys and said, we want to do a show with you guys. We don't know what the show is going to be. So often in media, whether it's linear television, radio, digital, whatever it is, people think they have to create the show first and then find the people to fit in. I think it's smart to do it the other way. Figure out who you're dealing with and then build the right show for those people. And that's what they allowed us to do at Intentional Talk. And that's why, I feel like we had some degree of success.
With the Best Damn Sports Show period and Intentional Talk, I would love a little maybe insight, like how do people create shows like that are so specific? Like Intentional Talk, of course, it's a host and co-host discussion, but how creative it is and how funny you guys interact and the different segment ideas. And of course, Best Damn is a talk show and debate show with guests and skits. Did you have a lot of opinion, and did you have a lot of creativity behind those two shows and maybe in the back behind the scenes?
Well, I've always been I always describe myself as a producer that happens to be on television or on a podcast or whatever it is. So I'm a creative guy. I don't like going in and being told, hey, here's what we're doing. Like, I feel like you have to have your thumbprint on a show. It doesn't mean that you're the only one who's coming up with creative ideas, because that's not what works. Everybody has to kind of bring their own creativity bag to the party. But if you're not a part of it and saying, okay, I feel like we might have to twist this discussion a little bit more to, okay, why are people going to care 24 hours after a story happens. What can we do to keep layering the story, make it more fun, put our little twist on it? So yeah, that is a really important role. It's something I love to do. And that's why with Jomboy Media and the Chris Rose rotation, I mean, I come up with all the topics and the discussion points, and our amazing editor Rob Scirocco puts his touches on it, and he'll text me and he'll say, "Hey, what if I get this piece of video in that area? What if we do this sort of graphic with it?" Absolutely, that's how you make things better. Is the good give and take, and I think it's really important for anybody that's young in the business to take ownership of a show that they're on.
Yeah, it's a great segue because I want to talk a little bit about Jomboy Media, and then we'll end off with NFL draft stuff. The Chris Rose rotation is a podcast that I've never seen before, and I don't think everybody's ever seen, where it's a rotating cast of characters that come in as your co-host. I've never heard of it. Where did you come up with the idea? And was your decision to go to Jomboy Media like an automatic yes, or did you really have to think about it because of how new they are in this media landscape?
Well, I talked to a couple companies right after I left MLB Network, and because I knew I wanted to stay in the baseball space somehow.
Sure.
And this was a great opportunity. The one thing, there were two things that people loved most about Intentional Talk: the chemistry that I had with Kevin, which I knew I couldn't take with me because he was staying put. The other was the interviews, right? What's the number one thing you'd always hear about baseball players? Oh, they're boring. I want to hear about them. And for years, I'd say, I don't think it's players that are boring. I think it's the way we're covering them that's boring. So that's why we tried to open it up on Intentional Talk and give you 8 to 10 minutes of a guy and not talk about every 3-2 slider, like I mentioned.
Right.
So what this allowed me to do was say, okay, I know who the good interviews and the good talkers are around baseball. Get me a half dozen of those guys so that I'm not knocking on their door every week, but maybe every 3 weeks during the season. Give me an hour of your time. We'll get a guest occasionally, so you can wrap with another active player for 20 to 30 minutes. Talk about your experiences. We don't have to, we don't have to play clean. We're not on TV. We're not on the radio. You can say what's really on your mind. And I talked to 7 guys, and 6 said yes. One guy was going to do it, but then he had another opportunity at a local level to do something on like a daily basis, and the company that he got hired by would not allow him to do a second thing, which is fine. But he would have done it if he hadn't done it, hadn't had that other opportunity, which I totally respect. So with these 6 guys, it's Trevor May of the Mets, Steven Brault of the Pirates, Miguel Rojas of the Marlins, Lucas Giolito of the White Sox, Archie Bradley of the Phillies, and Tyler Glasnow of the Rays.
Huge
Every
names.
2 weeks, I'll text them. I'll say, hey, next week we got it. Let's try and set your schedule. It's a little challenging, obviously, as they're zooming around the country. But they have all been super willing, extremely honest. They are taking us places that we haven't been taken before as baseball fans. The Trevor May episode drops and on Thursday, so it should be out by now. And he talks about his first performance as a New York Met. Signs a 2-year, $15 million deal and gets tattooed in Philly. Yeah. He is one of the most accessible players. He is a streamer. He is always online, on Twitch. He's on social media. I said, how'd that go for you? He said, well, I got back to my room and my Twitter crashed. There was so much traffic on it the first night.
Out.
And he was telling us stories about what people were saying to him. And he was honest. Let's just put it that way. So that's the sort of stuff I couldn't get on Intentional Talk.
Right.
We couldn't go there, and we wouldn't be allowed to talk about that.
I think media is changing now.
Totally.
With that kind of stuff. And I think that's the best part. I worked for the Twins in 2018, so I got to talk to Trevor a lot.
Yeah.
Great dude.
Interesting guy.
Very, very interesting guy. We'll wrap up with NFL draft talk. Of course, you'll be hosting all throughout the weekend, April 29th through May 1st on NFL Network, live coverage all day, every day. You're a Browns fan. take me through exactly what you want for the 26th pick overall. I know you've been following football for a while. The Browns are finally good. Shout out Baker Mayfield. I'm an OU fan. Father's from Oklahoma, so I've been rooting for him for a long time. What do you want from the Browns in this draft?
Well, they just signed Jadeveon Clowney, and so a lot of people might think you package that with Tack McKinley, a couple of one-year guys, both in their 20s, that maybe that's enough to get them through this season at an edge rusher opposite Myles Garrett. I'm just lukewarm on the Clowney signing, but I think it allows them to focus on two really high positions of need on this squad. One is linebacker. They just don't have enough athleticism there. And I know that Joe Woods likes to play this 4-2-5 system, which he really couldn't, meaning three safeties on the field. They just didn't have enough good, healthy safeties. Their second round pick a year ago, Grant Delpit out of LSU, tore his Achilles in camp. So he had to adjust on the fly, Joe Woods. I still think that they could go for either Zaven Collins out of Tulsa or Jamin Davis out of Kentucky. Two guys that can run, that are playmakers. Collins, a bit more decorated career. He's a monster. It looks like they put him in the Xerox machine and enlarged him on the screen compared to everybody else.
He looks like a complete player already, right? I've watched this tape already.
He does. So I would like one of those two guys if they're available at 26. If not, I don't think there's anything wrong with getting an extra corner. Last year in the playoff game and in week 17 against Pittsburgh, they were down to their 8th cornerback because of injuries and COVID. So you need as much depth as possible. I love the Troy Hill signing from the Rams. They got him for basically 2 years and $9 million. So, I feel good about that. I don't know what Greedy Williams health-wise is going to be able to give him.
Sure.
So I wouldn't be upset if they picked a corner. Let's put it that way.
Last question here. I'm in the New York-based area. I'm a Giant fan, but the Jets are a team that have been, let's say, the talk of the town throughout the draft these last couple of months, trading Darnold away for a boatload of picks, which I can't believe they got a second rounder for next year and a fourth rounder with that sixth rounder for this year for Darnold. It's incredible. But are from your perspective, are the Jets making the right decision getting Wilson at 2?
Oh boy. I have to admit, I have not seen enough game tape of Zach Wilson. Sure. I've seen a lot of highlights where he looks super fun and special. The question is he significantly better than Sam Darnold was when he came out of USC? To me, that's the question, because we have all been scarred by watching 3 seasons of Sam Darnold either running for his life, completing half his passes on a given Sunday, or sitting out because of mono. Like, those are, all those negative images and thoughts are on top of an NFL fan's head. So you're like, of course, Zach Wilson's going to be better. But we forgot, he was pretty good at USC and he was pretty special. And a lot of people were shocked.
Very, very good.
Number 1 overall to the Browns. And the Jets were like, oh my God, we got our guy. And now people are saying, well, he didn't have enough playmakers and he didn't have the right play caller and he had a crappy head coach and the organization. Well, okay, that's all well and good. And we all want to believe in Robert Saleh. He seems like an awesome dude. Everybody who played for him, out in San Francisco swears by the guy. I want him to be great. He has coached 0 games. So we don't know what type of head coach he's going to be. Joe Douglas, we think he's a good evaluator of talent. He has a ton of picks. We just don't know at this point. Right. We don't know. So to say that it is a great move to trade Sam Darnold out of there instead of trade that number 2 pick and, hold it for a king's ransom. I mean, you saw what the Dolphins got. You saw what the Eagles got when they were moving around. Imagine what the Jets could have gotten for assuring yourself the second best quarterback in the draft.
Last thing I'll say here is that the Jets are a team where over and over again, it seems like they just keep getting the worst picks after worst picks. And Darnold, it takes 3 years. You give a quarterback 3 years to know the system, to know how to play in the NFL, to know how to play against a top tier defense, all that stuff. And Jet fans are sick of it, but are I agree with you. I think Darnold's not that terrible. He just really hasn't been
here's the
given
thing.
enough.
Here's the problem, Taylor. We don't know if he's terrible. We've seen he's terrible, but we don't know if he is. Because if you're saying he didn't have the playmakers and he didn't have the support staff, nobody said Sam Darnold sucks. That's the one thing I haven't heard. What I've heard is he had a crappy coach, they didn't have a game plan, and they didn't have enough playmakers. That doesn't mean that he's a bad quarterback. So it's possible that Carolina lucks into a great guy. I just don't know. He has been extremely inconsistent, but I'm not good enough with the trained eye, and no fan is either, to know how much of that was on Darnold and how much of it was on the system and the lack of playmakers around him.
Chris, I appreciate you coming on. We will see you live from Cleveland, Ohio
Can't
for
wait.
the NFL draft from April 29th or May 1st. I'm excited. I'll be watching coverage. You can also follow Chris all over social media and listen to his podcast, The Chris Rose Rotation, on Jomboy Media Podcast Network. Chris, it's been a pleasure, man. Huge fan of yours. Keep killing it.
Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate it. Continued success as well.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. Hold on. I know you just watched that video. It's pretty good because you watched the whole thing. You made it this far. Just click that subscribe button. It's not that hard. I know you watched some other things, but was it as good as this? I don't think so, since you watched the whole thing. You enjoyed it. I know you did. You're nodding your head right now, and it's like, yeah, I enjoyed it, Taylor. I like it. I want to watch more. Click the button.